So in our last lecture, we were discussing some of the aspects and the results of an absolute state. And now we're going to focus on France, which again, by every historian that I've ever read, all agree that France was the best example of enacting this absolutist concept. But it didn't come overnight nor out of a vacuum. So we already mentioned going over the fact that it was floating around European circles, this concept of an absolutist monarchy. So this was something that was literally being thought about and discussed by philosophers and legal thinkers. And we see some of the foundations of French absolutism going back into the 17th century. Really, the one who has a lot to do to setting up the groundwork is Cardinal Richelieu. And, it's interesting, again, because you've heard me say that I think that it's really the states that have manipulated religion more than religion manipulating the state. You could say, okay, well, here's an example of a cardinal, being in state power. But as you've read this chapter, he's doing very little cardinal things, right? I mean, in other words, this is what his status is, but he is much more preoccupied with setting up the mechanisms of the state than he is, sending prayers and doing the sacraments or writing theological treatises. Okay, so he's really I would say strictly a state actor. Okay, and he is really going to set up all of the elements that are going to lead to creating this the ability of creating an absolute ruler. So as we saw in here, to me, it's not as important to me that you understand the nature of parliaments and intendants. Okay, if you do, that's great, as discussed on 496. Basically, what I want you to realize is what he was doing is creating an administration in which there a sort of bureaucracy that would be able to make happen all the things that the monarchy would want to have happen. Okay, and after him is going to come a man of lesser capabilities, but we're going to see Mazarin, and a civil war is going to break out. Okay, and to me, what's important, what you need to realize is between it was called the Fronde, and by the way, the Fronde, as it mentions, is a pejorative reference to kids having slingshot-like things, flinging out mud or rocks at passengers. But the Fronde is going to be several phases of rebellion, as I was talking about in the last lecture, where you have elites basically wanting to reassert themselves, and it creates some chaos, and it eventually is going to get defeated, but it certainly made the monarchy feel frightened. A young boy who's going to be experiencing this and seeing this and hearing mobs outside the window and very terrified is going to be the future absolutist Louis XIV. And so this period is especially going to influence him and leave a deep impression. In the same way that some of the events with the Boyars happened that left some trauma on Ivan the Terrible. Okay? And so as he comes to power, well, this is Cardinal Richelieu right here. Okay? I want to talk about Louis XIV. Louis XIV is the quintessential absolutist. Uh, um, and so, as soon as he becomes the sovereign, he wants to create a court life at Versailles, not Paris. I think he goes to Paris maybe 2 times in his whole entire life. It's only about 10 miles away. He has no interest in it. It's going to be a very unlikely area in which he creates this virtual city, and a kind of like a theme park area. There was once where there was a lodge that he would go out hunting with his father. He had some good memories. He's going to preserve it. He's going to put the architect through hell to make him do what he wants done. And Versailles is very interesting because he just slaps this thing up really fast. And to do it, it really requires cracking the whip on people to get it done. And it's not talked about in the textbook, but many people were dying. I mean, we're talking about no labor laws, no concern. It was quite brutal, the process in which he was able to hustle getting this massive court area put up. Okay, and he was very involved in it. Actually, a woman cursed him out in the open quite bravely because her son died. And he was just in shock. He couldn't believe it. He said, is she talking to me? You know, she said, you are a murderous, terrible person. And the poor woman had to pay consequences for that very brutally. So, you know, there's that real side to it. When we see the Versailles pictures of it and we look at videos of it, it's quite beautiful. But there is that there. You know, when you look at things like pyramids and other amazing monuments, you can often think what did happen, to the people who were building those things. Probably similar. Okay, but what's important though about Versailles is that he is going to bring, I think, around 10,000 nobles to live there with him, with their wives and their mistresses. So he's bringing them to be stuck with him and creating this world of where all of the elites are revolving their entire lives around him in this land. It reminds me of Duloc, in Shrek. If you guys seen that, Duloc is a perfect place. You remember that? Okay. This pristine, amazing place to be revolving around the Sun King. And he literally saw himself to that. He practically deified himself very consciously. And the nobility are going to later be chastised as kind of almost like eunuchs, castrated men who just bow, look quite comical in their subservience to him there at court, just begging for his attention. I remember taking a class on this French history, an undergraduate school, where the professor said that the nobles would be so excited if they were allowed to hold the candles to walk him to bed. And one time he accidentally dripped some wax on the king and was horrified, and I guess he wrote in his diary how wonderful and amazing his king is that he forgave him for this, dropping some wax on him as he walked him holding the candles to his bed chamber. So this is the kind of situation you had going on there. It wasn't a comfortable place either. There's rumors that by the time the food would get to the table, the distance from because of the size of the place and no heating, your food was going to come cold. There, in the wintertime, they actually claimed that sometimes the wine would be turning into ice by the time it made it to the table. That may be an exaggeration, but there's probably some truth to that coldness. Also, the bathrooms are far away. it was also reported that many times people would be leaving and they wouldn't make it to the bathroom in time, and they're pissing all over the floors. Um, when construction was taking place, it often smelled of human poo and so forth. You would have you didn't have the facilities there like we do now. Um, and so I don't know. It's I think sometimes it's hard to imagine, kind of just to think about. This place was constantly being under construction. There's all of these nobles being brought in. There's all this sexual intrigue. People revolving their whole lives around this king who is making everything take place around him. Okay, and in the middle of that, he's also doing things like revoking the religious freedoms that were then put in place in France before. He wants pure religious uniformity. It doesn't seem to me that he is thinking so much about Catholic things. He's thinking about unifying things. Okay, so again, he is really an authoritarian with Catholicism because that's what he wants to unify his country. I don't think he's thinking much about Catholicism, if you want to be honest. I mean, maybe some other studies would show different in his diaries, but I think he was thinking about hooking up with the next hot chick in the court area, to put it that way. Okay, that's what was on his mind. But he wanted uniformity. Okay, and he was going to do it brutally if necessary. Okay. And he was going to expand French territories through acts of war. Okay, so I will end this part here. We'll move on to the next section here. Here's a picture of Versailles. Pretty massive, right? Okay, and yeah, so then we're going to move on right after to this next section.